Hello, I am R.E. Burden. Welcome to my show, R.E. Burden Presents Deep Dives into the Divine Design. Today's topic, Day 2, the Day of the Airtight Seal.
All right, welcome back everybody to the deep dive. We're diving into a pretty fascinating topic today.
Yeah.
You ever feel like you're trying to connect the dots on something important, but the bigger picture, well, it just isn't quite snapping into focus?
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes the connections are hiding in plain sight, or maybe across sources you wouldn't immediately think to link.
Exactly. Today, we're going to take some seemingly separate ideas and see if we can uncover a surprising link.
Sounds intriguing. What are we looking at?
We're embarking on a deep dive into Day 2, the Day of the Airtight Seal, from the book of Brayshith, and that's pronounced Bearshith.
Ah, the creation narrative. Day 2.
Right. And we'll be exploring some thought-provoking reflections that connect it to the New Testament.
Okay, specifically.
Specifically, we have excerpts detailing this second day of creation, alongside reflections that draw some really intriguing parallels to the sealing of Yahshua's tomb, Jesus' tomb.
Wow, okay. Day 2 of creation and the sealing of the tomb. That's quite a jump.
It is. So our mission today is to understand the significance of this airtight seal, as it's termed, within the creation narrative itself.
And then explore how these reflections bridge that gap to the events after Yahshua's crucifixion.
Precisely, to uncover those surprising connections. Okay, let's unpack this, starting right at the beginning with Brayshith itself.
Makes sense. The passage we're focusing on is Brayshith 1, verses 6 through 8.
Okay, and it states, "Then the Almighty Creator said, 'There will be an airtight seal in the middle of the waters, and it will make a distinction between the waters.'" That's a pretty clear directive, isn't it?
It is. Very clear. And the text immediately tells us the Almighty Creator, well, he carried it out. He made the airtight seal.
And the result, what did this action achieve?
It resulted in a fundamental division. Waters beneath this airtight seal and waters above it.
So this airtight seal wasn't separating water from, say, land, but one body of water from another. Interesting.
Exactly. It's water separating water. And the described outcome is the creation of a distinct expanse between them.
An expanse. And did this expanse get a name?
It did. The text specifies the Almighty Creator called the airtight seal skies.
Skies. Okay. So on day 2, we see the creation of what we know as the skies, this separation of waters.
And the passage wraps up by noting the timing. Evening and morning, day 2. A complete creative period.
There's like a foundational step. Now, the reflections we have on this day, this is where things start to get layered, right?
Precisely. The reflections point out that day 2 holds significance beyond just being, the second day of the week.
How so?
Well, for one, it's also considered the third day from creation day itself, if you count that initial act.
Ah, okay. Day 1, day 2. Makes sense.
And perhaps most interestingly in this context, it's described as the second day of arrangement.
Arrangement. As opposed
to, say, filling or adornment, which comes later. The first few days are about setting up the structure. Day 2 is specifically seen as the arrangement of air within the water.
Arrangement of air in water. Okay, that's the concept. What does that arrangement imply, according to these reflections?
Well, this is where the idea of a typological connection comes in.
Okay, define typological connection for us quickly.
Sure. It's the idea that certain events, people, or objects in the Old Testament act as prefigurations or sort of shadows of things that happen in the New Testament.
Like foreshadowing across the Testament.
Exactly. And in this case, the reflection presents this arrangement of air on day 2 as a type and shadow of Yahshua's lifeless body in the tomb.
Wow. Okay, so the creation of the skies is being linked to Yahuah in the tomb. How does the water fit into that symbolism? The reflections mention lifeless earth under the lifeless waters.
Right. So within this specific typological interpretation, the water here signifies the waters of the tomb of lifeless matter. It's symbolic of, well, death or inactivity.
So the earth, representing this lifeless matter, is under these symbolic waters of lifelessness. And then the airtight seal, the skies, is established, creating what? A contained space.
Exactly. The reflection suggests the earth under these lifeless waters is now entombed in a pocket of air. This image of being enclosed, separated, that's a key element of the parallel being drawn.
Enclosed in a pocket of air. Now, shifting gears slightly, but still within these reflections, They bring up sound waves, air and water as conduits for sound. Why bring sound into this?
That's a great question. What's fascinating here is the implication of potential even in these initial stages.
Meaning?
Meaning, while sound isn't explicitly mentioned in the Bereshith account of day 2, the very creation of air and water, well, it lays the groundwork for sound to exist later. It's like setting the stage.
Because sound needs a medium to travel through. Air, water, those are mediums.
Precisely. And the reflections also note that sound waves travel slower, are less frequent maybe than light waves, which came about on day 1.
Is there a reason that contrast is highlighted, do you think?
It could be suggesting different ways of interacting with the created world. Light is perhaps more immediate, direct. Sound offers a different kind of engagement, maybe more nuanced. It hints at a multi-layered sensory experience that's being built.
The reflection then briefly talks about the process of hearing. Sound produced, transmitted, received by the ear, sent into the brain. And it ends with that phrase, "He who has ears to hear will hear." That feels significant.
It certainly suggests something beyond just the physical mechanics, doesn't it? A capacity for understanding, for reception that goes deeper.
Yeah, like a spiritual or symbolic hearing.
Perhaps an engagement with the meaning behind the creation, maybe even with the creator.
And there's also this mention of a mnemonic device, the ears of Yahuah and Yahshua the Messiah, connecting days 2 and 5 of the Old and New creation weeks.
Yes, that's mentioned. It's presented as a link we'll apparently explore more on day 5 in a future discussion. It definitely points towards a deliberate, structured design.
Echoes and connections between the days.
Okay. It really reinforces that idea of intentionality in the narrative.
Okay, so that gives us a deeper look into day 2 of the old creation. Through these reflections, the arrangement, the air pocket, the potential for sound, the typological link. Now let's turn to the New Testament passage. Matthew 27, verses 62 to 66. This describes the sealing of Yahshua's tomb. What's the scene here?
Right, so this happens the day after the crucifixion, which was a Friday. So on Saturday, the chief Kohanim, the priests, and the Pharisees go together to see Pilate.
The Roman governor. And they have a request.
They do. They're worried. They remind Pilate about something Yahshua had said.
Which was?
His prophecy, basically, that he would rise from the dead after 3 days.
And they were concerned about what exactly?
Their primary concern, or at least what they told Pilate, was that his followers, his students, might come steal the body.
Ah, and then claim the resurrection happened anyway.
Exactly. They said this last deception would be worse than the first meeting, worse than Yahshua's ministry itself.
So, damage control, essentially. They wanted to prevent any claim of resurrection. What did they ask Pilate to do?
They asked him to order the tomb to be secured, made safe, until the 3rd day passed.
To stop anyone from tampering with it. How did Pilate respond?
Pilate basically washed his hands of it, in a way. He said, "You have a guard, you will go, you will make it as secure as you know how." He gave them permission and resources.
He put it back on them. So what did they do?
They went and secured the grave. The text says they did this by setting a seal on the stone that covered the entrance.
A seal, like an official Roman seal.
That's generally the understanding, yes. Something to show it was officially closed and shouldn't be tampered with. And they also posted the guard Pilate mentioned.
So a deliberate, official act of sealing a tomb, making it secure. Now, bring us back to the reflections. How do they connect this event, the sealed tomb, with day 2 and the airtight seal?
Well, the fundamental parallel they highlight is that act of securing, just as air was, in a sense, secured around the lifeless earth on day 2.
Creating that pocket of air you mentioned.
Right. So similarly, the tomb containing the lifeless body of the Messiah was sealed, secured. It's presented as another instance of creating a secure enclosure around something temporarily devoid of life.
Okay, that parallel makes sense.
Yeah.
Enclosure, separation,
Yeah.
security.
Mm-hmm. And the reflections touch on the nature of that tomb seal. It mentions the common understanding that breaking such a seal, especially a Roman one, could carry the death penalty. It signified official authority.
Serious business.
Yeah.
But then it also brings in a specific theory from Ron Wyatt about an iron rod.
It does mention that, yes. Wyatt proposed a more, maybe, mechanical sealing, an iron rod used somehow to fasten the round stone across the entrance.
And the reflection notes a claim that part of this rod might still be there.
Yes, it mentions the claim that a fragment is supposedly still embedded in the outer wall of the tomb identified as Yahshua's. It's presented as a possibility, a more physical securing mechanism.
Interesting detail. But whether it was a wax seal or an iron rod, the core idea is the tomb was made secure.
Yeah.
Right? An intentional boundary was created.
Precisely. That act of creating a secure enclosure is the central point of comparison.
And then the reflection connects us back again to day 2 and sound.
Yes, it loops back to the idea that the conduits for sound, air, and water, established on day 2, were created with a future purpose in mind.
A purpose related to day 5 again, it seems.
That's the hint, yes. That the setup on day 2 finds its, well, not its fulfillment maybe, but its usage or purpose later on. It draws an analogy suggesting the sealed tomb also had a purpose related to what came after the sealing. Though it doesn't explicitly state resurrection here in relation to day 5, the implication of future revelation is strong.
Like the sealing wasn't the end, but a necessary step towards something else that would eventually be heard or revealed.
That's a very insightful way to put it, yeah. The reflection then really emphasizes that principle of arrangement again.
How the Almighty Creator set up the place first.
Exactly. Made a place for everything during those first 3 days of arrangement before adding the adornments, the life forms, and so on.
So day 2, with its airtight seal, its separation, its enclosure, it's part of that foundational structure, setting the stage.
That's how it's presented. And it specifically links day 2's arrangement of air and water to the adornment on day 5. The flying creatures in the air, the swimming creatures in the water.
Creatures that navigate using sound, which needs those mediums established on day 2.
Exactly. It ties the initial creative acts to the later filling of that creation in a really compelling way. It suggests a deep coherence.
So when we put it all together, we have this initial creation of an airtight seal in Bereshith, separating waters, creating the skies, enclosing a space.
An act of arrangement.
And then much later we have the deliberate act of sealing a tomb containing Yahshua's body, an act of securing.
Right, 2 seemingly very different events on the surface.
But the reflections we've looked at today argue there's a significant underlying resonance, a connection.
Yes, both can be viewed as acts of enclosure, of securing. In the old creation context, it's securing air, a medium holding potential around lifeless matter.
And in the New Testament event, it's securing a tomb holding, again, lifeless matter, at least for that period.
Correct. And both acts, within their narratives, are presented not just as endings, but as preparations, setting the stage for future events, future revelations, future adornments, you might say.
It really makes you ponder, doesn't it? How often might seemingly ordinary acts of separation or securing or enclosing hold a deeper significance we don't immediately see?
In the grand narrative, or even in our own smaller narratives.
Yeah. What other kinds of containers or seals might we encounter in life or in Scripture or anywhere that have a purpose that's still waiting to be fully revealed or understood?
That's a fascinating question to carry away. What's being held and for what purpose?